All right, friends, welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we're talking about how to increase D&D player engagement in your games. Player engagement is really important. You want players who are engaged, and as GMs, it is our responsibility to help our players be more engaged, to help them enjoy the game, to help them care about the game, to help them want to play it, to be motivated to play it, to take it seriously enough that they're invested in it on an emotional level, on an attention span level, right? But how do you do it? This is a really great question. And in this video, I'm going to give you 12 tips that I use. I'm going to go through these fast. I'm going to try to give you fast tips. I'm not going to dilly-dally. Going to just give these to you straight up. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a resource. I'm going to put the link in the description for my player engagement desires list. Find the link in the description. I'm going to teach you how to use this as a bonus tip. So stick to the end of the video because this is probably the most important thing. I want to get these 12 tips out of the way, then move on to that most important bonus tip, which is how to use this to basically make your games awesome. And you can set it up from the very beginning, head off those player engagement issues early. I'm going to teach you how I would use this. This is a brand new thing I just created. Anyway, we're going to get to that, but that's going to be basically tip 13. I'm going to go through these other 12 tips first real quick. So let's jump into it. Tip number 1, leverage their backstory to give them some skin in the game. This is part of the character creation process or part of just introducing players in. When you tie the backstory of their character into the campaign in a way that is meaningful and that makes their characters feel like they count right from the beginning, you're highly likely to get more engagement coming out of the gate. This is just one tip, but it's a very important tip. Speaking of that, if you want to get some skin in the game, help me by hitting that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button, and drop me a comment. You can either let me know how you help to increase your players' engagement, or you can ask me a question and I will answer it maybe in a future video. Thank you so much for that. I'm on my way to climbing to 5,000 subs, and every time someone hits that thumbs up button, it helps me. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to tip number 2. Use NPCs to elicit responses and to engage players in individually meaningful ways. NPCs are a fantastic tool to engage player to player. So you as a player, the GM, still though playing the game, and your PCs, you interact in a number of different ways. Whether it be a prolific villain who does a bunch of smack talking, or whether it be a kind old lady who needs help crossing the street, who then gifts your PC with a magic dagger left to her by her deceased adventuring husband. You can use NPC interactions to really increase emotional connection in the game with your players. This is one of my favorite tactics for creating meaningfulness. And you can especially do this by introducing NPCs who are going to journey with the group, like main NPCs, and have them build bonds with the PCs. These interactions are often very meaningful to players. This brings us to tip number 3. Set up personal PC plot arcs and touch on them every session. Now, what exactly does this mean? So when I run games, what I've been doing recently is I have every player, when they create their character as part of their backstory, they create a personal plot arc in the campaign. Now, keep in mind, I help them to understand the context of the campaign first, so they do kind of understand where the campaign is planned to go. I give them a 1 to 2 page synopsis of like the world state, the basic situation, kind of the campaign they're looking at, and what kind of campaign it's going to be. Then I let them set a personal plot arc for the character. When characters accomplish personal plot arcs, the whole group levels up. So these are actually very important, and there's a reason to pursue them. But even more than the leveling up part, giving them a personal plot arc helps you to determine what their character cares about. And when you move those forward, even just a little bit every single session, when you add to it, when you contribute to it, that really goes a long way toward helping them to feel like they have real skin in the game. They're actually playing a character who matters, whose plot arc matters to you as the GM, and then you can add to it, whether it be they get a clue or they make a little progress in their personal plot arc every session, or sometimes there might be a big leap forward where you even dedicate part of a session to helping them accomplish that plot arc. This can really help to increase player engagement because it can get your players to care more about the game and their player and how they interact with your world. Speaking of that, do you struggle with keeping your players engaged with amazing plot arcs? Do your players often ruin your plot arcs? Do you kind of have trouble thinking of plot arcs on the fly? If so, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who have this issue, which is why I created the Ultimate Plot Randomizer. This is my ebook. It contains 4 D100 tables that'll let you roll random plot arcs on the fly instantly. No fuss, no muss. You can download this for free. In the description, there's a link. When you click the link, you'll be asked to sign up for my email list. And in the first email, which you will get within seconds, you can download this for free. Unsubscribe from the email list if you don't want to be on it, but you get a bunch of cool stuff. So I would stay on it if I were you. That leads us to tip number 4. Make every single player matter every session. So, one of the best ways to create player engagement is to make every character feel meaningful. What do I mean by this? So, every single game, you're going to have every player in your party playing. Every single player at your table should get at least a little bit, like one scene, even a minor scene, where they are extremely significant. Maybe a crucial NPC trusts only them with like a confession. Or maybe this shop owner who has information will only talk to one of your players. Or maybe one of your players finds something special and cool. Like, give every single player a moment to shine. If you do this, this is at least for one point in the session going to give that player a reason to be very engaged and will really heighten the chances that they'll be excited about your game instead of kind of falling into more like passive boredom. That leads us to tip number 5. Let your players win at least some of the time. I try to make it so that every single session, every one of my players wins at something. Like they have a big success. Maybe they walk into a tavern and, the fighter walks up to the bar and this one dude like bumps him and he's like, "Hey, watch where you're going." And the fighter might, in typical fighter style, might roll an intimidation check to try to talk the guy down. And I'll be like, "Oh, sorry, bud." And the NPC will kind of slunk away. See, I give the fighter a win. We want to give players a chance to be cool, to be awesome, to be feared, to be loved, right? To be significant. And this is really a key point. Give every single player at your table a win, no matter how small it might be. It might be that they make the final hit in a combat, or it might be that they are the ones who manage to win the persuasion check when trying to get information from the barmaid. Whatever it is really important that every single player wins at least once a session. There's an interesting study done on rats where like big rats and small rats would wrestle. Big rats could always win when they wrestle. However, you'd be interested to know that big rats will sometimes let the little rats win. They actually do this actually once every 3 to 4 times they wrestle. Why? Because if the big rats always win, the little rats will stop playing and then the big rats won't have playmates. So this is actually kind of true with us humans. We like to win sometimes. We want to get a win. We want to feel good sometimes. If you give your players a win every single session, it's going to give them a bigger reason to come back and care about the story. Don't take my word for it. The rats told us so. Speaking of winning, down in the description, you'll find a link to my Discord channel. It's free. You should join it. There are a bunch of GMs who win all the time in my Discord. We have an awesome group growing. I would love to invite you, have you join it. So make sure to check out that link in the description. Join my Discord. It's awesome. With that being said, let's move on to tip number 6. Allow your players to hold a few things sacred and give them obvious steps to protect those things. Players hold some things important to them. I one time had a player who had this pair of boots of, I think they were boots of striding and springing. They make you run faster and jump further. This player really valued these boots, and they were such a primary fixture of his character. Like he, slept with them on every single night, never left them out of his sight. They were very, very special to him. And the way that I treated these boots was with a certain type of sacredness. I know that these meant a lot to his character. They were this might sound weird, but it's a big part of his character's role playing. And rather than like having someone steal the boots or just like willy-nilly messing with that, I let him have that be a sacred thing. And I tried to let every player kind of through their role playing, I try to determine what do they hold sacred. And I make sure it's somewhat protected by plot armor. This gives them a continued reason to play, and it helps them to know that the GM isn't just out to take their good stuff, but they kind of have warning. So for example, let's say that a player has an NPC that they care a lot about who's kind of vulnerable and weak. Well, instead of just having that NPC get murdered in an alley, a dark alley at night for no reason, willy-nilly, taking that NPC from the player, what I'll do is I'll maybe have them roll for a perception check. You notice that, that character is getting ready to leave and it's dark outside. It's dangerous. You sense there could be danger out there, right? So you're kind of giving them warning. There's a bit of plot armor surrounding the thing they hold sacred. I try to do this with players for things that really matter to them. I create a couple degrees of safety between them and the disaster or losing the thing they hold sacred. And this helps to keep them invested because there's like a reason to, right? It's sort of like an incentive to keep going. This leads us to tip number 7. Introduce interesting and thought-provoking puzzles, mysteries, conflicts, etc. This is kind of more of a general GM tip, but the more you introduce interesting stuff, for the players to do, the more they're going to stay engaged. And this just comes down to partly session prep, planning cool stuff, and then improvising well on the spot. So a general GM tip, but it's still important for player engagement. Now we're going to move into the territory of a few more niche tips. These tips that I'm about to give you are way more niche, way less common probably. I'm just going to kind of run through them really quick because they're things that I have done as a last ditch effort to try to get players more engaged. Number 8, give your disengaged player an awesome pet. This works a lot better than you would think. Number 9, introduce a love interest. I love this tactic so much. There's so much drama to be had by introducing a love interest. And if you can get the player to bite, ooh, it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. But it's a fantastic way to get them engaged. Number 10, cause in-game NPCs to value and look up to the PCs. Have your NPCs look up to your characters. Like a lot of times the NPCs who journey with my PCs, they're all like obviously lower level than the PCs, and they look up to the PCs as sort of like leaders and mentors and confidants. They might come to them with their dating problems, their gambling problems, their emotional problems. If they're sad, they're going to seek out a mentor to talk. It's going to be one of the PCs, right? Having the PCs be sort of like mentorship overseeing figures for the NPCs in the group gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of greater meaning and helps them to understand that they are actually really special in a campaign. And when they feel special in this way, they're way more likely to be highly engaged. Tip number 11, distribute time equally, making sure every player gets the spotlight. This is, again, pretty typical GM advice, but it's really important. Players who don't get as much playtime will probably not be as engaged. Some players kind of hog the spotlight. And while I love players who are really boisterous about roleplay, I always want to make sure to pay attention to the introverts in my group, make sure that they get equal playtime as well. And then number 12, let every player take turns choosing the intro music. Now, this is a very niche thing. At the beginning of every session, I kind of play like some music to just get us started. I'm like, all right, we're starting the game. Hit play on some song. One thing that's really cool, people love music. Maybe I'll let the table, like we go around and session number 1, player number 1 gets to choose the intro music. Session 2, player 2 gets to choose it. During the intro music, I usually go around and I let every player kind of describe as if we're beginning a show. Okay, just briefly describe what your character is doing right now. And it's just completely up to them to just kind of say they're putting on their armor or they're shining their shoes or they're fishing off the dock, right? They're having a drink at the tavern. Whatever it is they're doing, I just kind of give them rein to have like kind of a theatrical entrance, and then the music that they love gets to play. So it's like I play a song. Songs are like 3 to 4 minutes. We'll take that 3 or 4 minutes, let everyone kind of introduce what their characters are doing, and then boom, we jump into the session. Generally, the way we do it is I have them all roll D100s. The one who rolled the highest gets to be the first one to go, and we go around the table just describing, basically starting role play. But music means a lot to people. And when you let players taking turns choose the intro music to start the session up, then this can be a cool thing that'll get them more engaged. And it's maybe a little thing, but every little thing counts. And this leads us to our bonus tip, which is use my player engagement desires list when introducing players to the campaign. Now, I told you about this at the beginning of the session. I'm going to put it here just for reference. Here's what I would do with this. Now, this is new. I actually have not yet used this, but I plan to use it at my next session. And I plan to do exactly this. I'm going to tell you exactly what I plan to do. This is a list of, as far as I can tell, all the stuff that players really care about. And I believe that every role player has about 2 or 3 or 4 things that really matter to them in a role play game. Now, you can talk about this when you start the campaign. This would be even better. But what I would do is I would print this out and I would pass it around to all my players. And I would say, hey, mark down the 4 things in order from greatest to least, or you can pass it around and you can even write the things down. But mark down the 4 things on this list that would give you the most motivation to be the most engaged in D&D. Like, which of these things do you care about the most? Is it the NPC relationships? Is it the player characters, the bonds and conflicts with other PCs? Is it combat? Is it being in a leadership role in the game? Like, what kinds of things do you love to do? Now, newer players may not really know. They might write down 4 things that they think sound fun. However, they might come to realize very quickly that those things are different. That's okay. The idea here is for you as a GM to use this as a tool to just collect a little bit of information about your characters. And if you can have your characters kind of give you their, baseline feedback, the top 3 or 4 things that they value the most, this can really help you to kind of hone in and give those players the attention in the types of ways that they deserve that will help to keep them engaged. This is really about being a GM who pays attention to their players and their desires and what kind of game they want to play. But even more niche and specific than that, this gives you categories of things that your characters and players are likely to value in the roleplay experience. And then you can provide those things intentionally, even individually between characters. And then, of course, over time, you might even reintroduce this and say, hey, have your desires changed? Let's go, maybe every 5 levels or something. So anyway, there you go. You can grab that in that link in the description. You can download it, print it out, use it at your next session. So there you go. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm here almost every day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. So give me a thumbs up and a subscribe and drop me a comment, and I will see you awesome people on the next one.